They laughed at her, mocked her, and whispered that she didn't even belong in the library. But what they didn't know was that the very book in her hands carried a secret that would silence every single one of them in the most shocking way. The library was not just a building. It was a sanctuary carved out of silence, a place where thoughts from centuries past, whispered from the spines of books and ideas, waited like treasures behind glass. The polished floors reflected the golden shafts of morning sunlight, and the high ceilings carried the scent of paper, old and new, fragile and fresh. For most visitors, the library promised peace. But for Mariah Johnson, walking through those giant oak doors that Saturday morning felt nothing like peace. It felt like stepping into a furnace of eyes. Every glance seemed sharper than the last, weighing her, measuring her, silently asking if she even belonged in a space like this. The grand hall was filled with hushed footsteps and shuffling pages, yet to Mariah the silence wasn't comforting. It was suffocating. She adjusted the strap of her worn leather bag against her shoulder, wishing it could shield her from the invisible arrows of judgment that seemed to pierce her from every corner. Her outfit was simple. A pressed white blouse, tucked neatly into dark blue jeans. Nothing extravagant, nothing out of place. Yet she could feel the weight of disapproval radiating from a corner where a group of young adults sat with laptops and coffee cups. Their eyes flickered in her direction, their whispers barely veiled. "Look at her pretending like she belongs here," one voice murmured, just low enough to sting more than if it had been shouted. "She's probably never read half these books," another chuckled. The kind of laugh that carried poison in its softness. Mariah felt her chest tighten, her pulse quickening in betrayal of the calm face she fought to maintain. The air around her suddenly felt thicker, the walls taller, as though the entire library had conspired to push her back out through the door she had just entered. But she refused to retreat. Instead, she walked with slow determination toward the table stacked high with freshly released books. Their glossy covers shone like jewels under the warm lights, beckoning her closer. She reached out, her fingertips grazing the smooth surface of one after another, until she paused on a single volume that seemed to pull at her soul. The laughter behind her grew softer but sharper, like daggers hidden in velvet. She could almost feel the words wrapping around her like chains, mocking, diminishing, trying to shrink her presence in a place where she had every right to stand tall. Her fingers lingered on the book, tracing its embossed title with reverence, as if the cover itself contained a secret meant only for her. In that fragile moment, the noise of ridicule tried to overshadow her, but something inside her refused to break. She held the book closer, ignoring the stifled laughter echoing behind her, and allowed herself a small, steady breath. They thought she didn't belong. They thought she was pretending. What they didn't know, what they couldn't imagine, was that she wasn't just a visitor wandering aimlessly among stories. She carried one of her own, and soon they would discover just how wrong they had been. The whispers didn't stop when Mariah touched the book. If anything, they sharpened, like glass being ground underfoot. She could feel their eyes boring into her back, watching every movement as though she had no right to touch what was in her hands. She lifted the book carefully, holding it with both palms, and for a brief moment the room seemed to slow down. The glossy cover caught the golden light streaming through the library's windows, and her reflection looked back at her. Tired eyes, but a determined gaze. To her, the book felt alive, almost like it was waiting for her touch. But behind her, the snickers started again. "Bet she just grabbed it because it looks important," one of them whispered with a smirk. The words weren't meant to be heard, but they were aimed directly at her, sharp as arrows. "She wouldn't even understand it," another added, her laugh barely contained, dripping with arrogance. Mariah's throat tightened, but she didn't let her expression falter. She knew this kind of laughter too well. It was the laughter that came from ignorance dressed up as superiority, from people who thought knowledge had a color, a class, a face, and hers wasn't it. Still, the sting of their voices echoed inside her like a cruel melody. She wanted to whirl around and silence them with one sentence, one undeniable truth that would shut their mouths forever. But she didn't, not yet. Timing was a weapon, and she intended to use it wisely. She turned the book over, her eyes scanning the back cover. The blurbs of praise from critics and readers were bold and glowing. Words like masterpiece, revolutionary, and a voice that demands to be heard. She read them slowly, deliberately, letting the weight of each word seep into her chest. The group behind her wasn't impressed. "Look at her acting like she's analyzing it," one muttered, his tone mocking. "She probably doesn't even know the author's name." That sentence almost broke her composure. Her hand tightened around the book, her nails pressing into the hard cover. If only they knew. If only they had even a clue who they were laughing at. But instead of snapping back, she inhaled deeply and raised her chin just a little higher. Their words tried to cage her, but the truth sitting in her hands was stronger than any insult they could throw at her. Other library goers glanced up, some with disapproval at the noise, others with indifference. But the group didn't care. Their mockery wasn't just about the book. It was about her presence, her existence in a place they thought she didn't deserve. Mariah let their words hang in the air, unanswered, because she knew silence was sometimes more powerful than 1,000 comebacks. She held the book like a shield, pressing it close to her chest, and allowed herself a faint smile that none of them could understand, because deep inside, she knew the storm would turn. And when it did, the same mouths that mocked her now would fall silent in disbelief. At that moment, the librarian, a gray-haired man with a warm voice, approached the table. His eyes lit up when he saw Mariah holding the book. "Ah," he said with unmistakable pride, "that one has been flying off the shelves this week. The author's words are powerful. She's remarkable." The young adults exchanged smirks, rolling their eyes at his enthusiasm. One of them even muttered, "Yeah, sure. People exaggerate." Mariah smiled faintly, almost secretively, and asked, "Do you really think so?" "Absolutely," the librarian replied. "In fact, the author is scheduled to visit here soon." "We're honored to have her," the group snorted, one whispering just loud enough for her to hear, "like she'd ever show up here." Mariah closed the book slowly, her fingertips brushing across the embossed letters of her own name on the cover. Section 4. The Revelation. Finally, she lifted her chin and turned to face them. Her voice was calm, but carried the weight of truth. "She already did," Mariah said, her eyes locking on theirs. She tilted the book so the light caught the author's name printed boldly on the cover, Mariah Johnson. For a moment, the library fell utterly silent. The whispers stopped mid-breath. The smirks dissolved into stunned disbelief. One of the young adults blinked rapidly, as though trying to process what they had just seen. Another's face flushed with the heat of embarrassment. The librarian's smile widened knowingly. "Yes," he said, nodding toward her with respect, "you're looking at her." Section 5. The Silence. After the mockers didn't laugh anymore. They didn't whisper. Their arrogance shriveled in the face of undeniable truth. Mariah didn't need to gloat, didn't need to scold them. Her presence, her achievement, spoke louder than any defense she could have offered. She placed the book back on the table, but not before sliding her pen from her bag and signing her name across the first page. She left it open, a quiet signature glowing on crisp white paper, a reminder to anyone who doubted what greatness could look like. As she walked out of the library, the silence behind her was thick, the kind that comes when pride is shattered, when judgment is proven wrong, when a lesson is carved forever into memory. And Mariah? She walked taller than she had when she entered, knowing her story had just written itself into theirs. And in that single moment, their laughter vanished, replaced by silence they'd never forget. If you want to hear more powerful stories like this, don't forget to like, share, and drop your thoughts in the comments. And of course, subscribe so you never miss the next twist that will leave you speechless.